To know more such amazing stories from Indian history, click the bell icon and subscribe to Live History India.
This fort, just off the port town of Murud, around 145 kilometers from Mumbai on the Konkan coast, is not just spectacular, it is also historic. Ruled by Siddis, or people of African origin, for over 500 years, the fort of Janjira could never be conquered. So what is it that made the fort of Janjira so coveted? And how did it land up having Africans at its helm for so long? We took a trip to the island fort to find its many secrets and learn about its strong African connections with historian Pushkar Soni.
Janjira was a very important fort because it was based just off the mainland. It was not vulnerable to attack from the land, nor was it really vulnerable to attack from the sea. It also sat in the middle of the Western Indian coastline, thereby controlling all movements of coastal shipping that happened all the way from Bharuch and Diu and Daman all the way down to Mangalore. It also was the place where a number of traders came from Africa, from the Middle East, and from Europe eventually. They traded in all kinds of luxury goods, ivory, gold, silks, and most importantly, a trade in horses. Horses, as we know from the 12th century, have been imported by successive regimes in India. And somehow we could never breed horses in India, and there had to be a continuous supply of horses from the Middle East. Janjira was in a good place to control this kind of trade. It was therefore strategically important, militarily important, and eventually important because of its connection to Africa. This connection was that the fort of Janjira from the 1500s onwards was controlled by a group of ethnic Africans called the Siddis. While we are unsure of the reasons as to why the Siddis decided to settle here in large numbers through the 16th and essentially in the 17th century, we know that under the Nizam Shahs of Ahmednagar, the first Siddi commanders were set up at this fort. There's a very colorful story of how Burhan Nizam Shah, the second of the Nizam Shahi rulers, wanted to establish his control over this stretch of land and this small island, which was occupied by a recalcitrant local headman called Ram Patil. This Ram Patil refused to entertain any demands for tribute from the kings on the mainland, and in fact had gone to this island which he fortified in a simple way and put up a resistance against all the troops of Burhan Nizam Shah. Finally, Burhan Nizam Shah decided to depute one Bairam Khan to go and conquer this fort. Well, not much of a fort at this time, but really this island. And Bairam Khan pretended to be a trader and went to the island along with his men, and later suggested that the women folk who were traveling in their caravan should be allowed on the island because he felt very unsafe about leaving them on the mainland. Ram Patil agreed, and palanquins of these women were brought over. And of course, once they arrived, everybody found out that they did not contain any women, but troops of the Nizam Shah, who quickly decided to reduce the island, make captive the inhabitants, and take possession of it. The Nizam Shahs appointed a succession of commanders who were ethnic Siddis at this place. Right through the 16th century, till the regency of Malik Ambar, who himself was a Siddhi. Malik Ambar also kept up this tradition of having Siddhi commanders on this island of Janjira, perhaps because they were geographically most connected with this westernmost outpost of the Nizam Shahi kingdom. After all, Janjira was the place which would receive ships from Africa directly. The Siddis came here as military mercenaries, as traders, as sailors, and sometimes as slaves. When we say slaves, of course, there's an excellent work by Richard Eaton and Indrani Chatterjee that talks of this kind of military slave ownership and how a number of Siddis came to India. The Siddis were an important force at almost all the courts of the Indian sultanates, from Bengal in the east to Mandu in central India, and in all the sultanates of the Deccan.
The fort of Janjira remained under the Siddis from 1489 to 1947. Its importance lay in its strategic location along a coast that was busy with trading ships as they sailed across the Arabian Sea to ports along the stretch of the Konkan. This stretch also attracted pirates and military expeditions from time to time. The Siddis, who ruled from here, took advantage of their strategic position, and this combined with their naval prowess made them act as gatekeepers to the coast. They played a crucial military role, aligning with different powers of the Deccan through the medieval period. Later, they also struck an alliance with the Mughals under Aurangzeb against the Marathas, and after that, they were allies of the British too. Over this period, the Siddis also evolved into a monarchy.
The Siddis were not kings, they were not monarchs till a much later date. They actually were elected heads of the community that controlled Janjira. All of them were ethnic Siddis or Habshis, a word that derives from Abyssinian. The Siddis used to elect amongst themselves the person most capable of ruling. Until the 1880s, they continued with this system of having a council that elected amongst themselves a ruler. The post was not hereditary. The Nawab of Janjira was a title introduced only in the colonial period, when Janjira, like all other kingdoms, needed to have a line of succession and be a subsidiary to the British Empire. Now, significantly, from the first commander who set up, somebody called Fahim Khan, on the fort island of Janjira, through Malik Ambar, and then eventually in the 17th century, a series of very important naval commanders who will take up service as the heads of the imperial navy of the Mughals under Aurangzeb. The Siddis managed to keep a tight grip on the island. In fact, in the late 17th century, when Siddhi prowess is at its greatest, they control 22 land forts on the mainland as well. So the kingdom of Janjira, as it evolves, it begins from this small island fort, which remains their stronghold throughout. But they also expand to take up significant land holdings on the mainland. The Siddhis will build under one Siddhi Surur Khan, who's their leader, in the 1700s, important fortifications on the island, and also a set of funerary monuments on the mainland. In the 1770s, the Siddhis signed treaties with the English as well, in which they are to be allies both in offense and defense. But they're also friends with a selective few. They are friends with the Mughals, they are friends with the Adil Shahs at one point. The only people whom they keep fighting are the Marathas. And the Marathas managed to capture a number of their land holdings, but never managed to conquer this fortress, which is therefore always called impregnable. If there are any legendary forts in India which have never been won over, Janjira certainly is one of them.
The fort of Janjira still looks imposing, and it is also confounding. It is said that approaching attackers would find it tough to find the main entrance. With thick walls rising over 40 feet, the fort was well protected, and the bastions above gave the Siddhi soldiers a clear line of sight. Today you will still find some of the famous cannons that made this fort legendary.
As a fort, Janjira is absolutely unique because it is on an island, and an island supplied with fresh water in the form of two springs. There are two large reservoirs on this fort, which means that the fort, if it's stocked with food, is not reliant on the mainland for anything. The approach to Janjira is what makes it impregnable. From the land side, one has to cross shallow, rocky waters to get to the fort, which means you can't really wade, but nor can you sail in large vessels. You can only cross over in small craft. From the seaward side, again, the waters are too shallow to allow large ships to come in, keeping the fort just out of range of big cannon that ships might have. Janjira, therefore, is neither on land nor in water. It occupies a strange liminal space. To make a land invasion, you need to cross water. To make an invasion from sea, you need to cross certain elements of land. The fort and the island are congruent, which means except for one designated space where boats can unload and load people or goods, it is impossible to land anywhere on that island. Because every time you come up against the edge of the island, you have a big fortification wall. These walls, of course, are outfitted with all kinds of battlements and guns, ensuring that you never come close to the fort anyway. The entrance to Janjira is facing the mainland and it's very difficult to spot. So even if you circle at a safe distance the fort of Janjira in a small boat, it's difficult to spot the entrance, and once you do, it's impossible to unload more than one or two boats at that point. If you come with 20 people at a time, you are sure to get massacred. Nobody was able to win Janjira, though several powers tried. The great Shivaji Maharaj and his son Sambhaji also tried to invade Janjira but were unsuccessful. In fact, the Marathas built a small fort at a short distance. This fort of Padmadurg, unlike Janjira, did not have a source of fresh water and therefore relies on rainwater harvesting for all its needs. This fort could not even control the shipping traffic to Janjira, thereby blockading it. In fact, everybody at some point gave up efforts to conquer the fort island of Janjira. In the 1700s, Siddis Khan built a very impressive set of fortifications on the island, making it invincible forever. There are also 3 large cannon on top of Janjira, which date from the 16th and 17th centuries. The firepower of these 3 cannon would have been enough to dispel any invasions from the land. Today you also have a number of other English and Dutch cannon on the fort, but those are probably placed there much later. In any case, there are gunpowder magazines on the inside and there's a big cavalier. The fort has guns pointing outwards in every direction that can target people on land and people at sea. This is truly one of those forts which not only has the reputation of being invincible, but historically has never been captured, right from its foundation in the 1500s till 1948, when the state of Janjira acceded to the Indian Union.
The fort of Janjira acted as a small city within. Here you will see the ruins of a mosque, a palace, and reservoirs of fresh water. That was really what made this fort so special. Access to fresh water ensured that the soldiers within the fort could hold out against any assault, no matter how long it took. By the 18th century, the Siddis of Janjira were a power to reckon with, and this allowed them to step out and build monuments like this necropolis where the later Siddis were buried and this palace.
In 1904, the then Nawab of Janjira decided to build himself a new palace on the mainland close to the village of Murud. This palace, called Ahmadganj, was designed by a Turkish architect. It was later enlarged in 1933. It was built with lavish material with design ideas from the Maghrib, from the Middle East, and from other parts of India. Built out of fine material and ornamented in exquisite taste, this palace would serve as the primary residence of the Nawabs of Janjira. Yet there was a large number of Siddis who stayed on the island till 1972, when the Archaeological Survey of India finally decided to evict them. Also on the mainland are a set of absolutely stunning tombs built by the Siddis. This is in a village called Khokri. In this village you have several tombs, the largest one of which is the tomb of Siddhi Surur Khan, the same ruler of Janjira who made the last important round of fortifications on the island. Siddhi Surur Khan saw territorial expansion and also serving as the commander of the Mughal Navy made a fortune. The people who ruled before him, Siddhi Khairiyat Khan and Siddhi Yaqut Khan, also have their tombs nearby. This whole necropolis of the Siddhis on the mainland was a sign of their growing confidence and prowess. Earlier rulers were buried on the island fort itself. Eventually, when in 1948 the kingdom of Janjira acceded to the Indian Union, Janjira as a state had significant territorial holdings. It also boasted a uniquely secular character where people in high offices were not only Siddhis but also Hindus and Christians and Jews, in addition to Muslims. There is one more royal family and kingdom associated with Janjira, and that is the kingdom of the Nawabs of Sachin. From amongst the Siddhis, someone was promised a kingdom yielding the same revenue as Janjira if he decided to help the Maratha Peshwas in their conquest of Janjira. Accordingly, the first Nawab of Sachin was given some lands in Gujarat. But since the Marathas could never conquer Janjira, his kingdom remained this modest landholding. Of course, in 1804, when the lands pass over to the British, he is given his status, title and kingdom under a treaty of subsidiary alliance, and the Nawabs of Sachin, like the Nawabs of Janjira, will nominally rule from their state till the Indian Union comes into existence.
The rulers of Janjira were called Wazirs till 1803, after which they used the title of Nawab. It was only after 1879 that the rulers were truly dynastic and recognized as a royal family. Over time, the kingdom of Janjira became a protectorate state under the British, who gave it the same status as other princely states with an 11-gun salute. Interestingly, Janjira was one of the last states to join the Indian Union in 1948. The fort was inhabited by Siddhis till 1972, when the ASI, or the Archaeological Survey of India, served them a notice. The new Ahmedganj Palace was the property of the Nawabs, who lost their privy purse in 1971, along with the other princely states. But even today you can sail into the waters of the Janjira fort and find the most spectacular monument that remained unconquerable.